Hello everyone, this is EJ Elgin with Sonia Castellino here in the Lyft office. We hope this presentation finds you relaxed and snuggled up next to a warm fire, and happy holidays to everyone. We thought that we would put this presentation together because I know the focus of our last couple of instructional leadership team meetings have been to um, put a lot of our resources together. And now that we've kind of got a library of resources and assessments, we want to ensure that our assessments are high quality. So as you can see, the title of this is Making Our Assessments from Good to Great. And the objective of this presentation is to ensure that we are given data that's high quality, because if we have high quality data, it's going to lead to an effective DDI implementation. So in January, when we come together, we want to go from talking about where to find assessments to actually using the data and assessments to help drive instruction. So with that being said, what we're going to do is we've pulled an assessment from our common assessment folder, and we're going to look into three different components of what we feel is going to make our assessments go from good to great. So the first question that we're going to look into is the assessment that I'm going to give going to provide me the data that I'm looking for? So what kind of data am I looking for in my assessment? So just as a brief overview to the group, I'm going to go ahead and show you first off where you can pull some assessments. So I believe we've shared with you the Project Lift Common Assessment folders, and if I come into math, you have it broken down by grade levels. And I'm going to go ahead and actually pull up an assessment that we're going to look at here. So I'm going to go into 5th grade. We're going to go into assessments. Let's take something out of base 10, because if my memory serves me correct, that's what we're going to be looking at in January. And let's go ahead and pull this middle one. Okay, so now that we've pulled an assessment, Sonia and I are going to kind of role play a conversation on what a good assessment conversation should look like. So going back to this question, is this assessment going to provide me the data that I'm looking for? So at this point, I'm going to start the role play. Sonia, thanks for meeting with me. I've spent probably a couple days covering standards 5 and 6 within numbers in base 10. And it's where students have to be able to multiply and divide with multiple digit numbers. So what I've done, just to kind of give you a heads up, is within standard 5, I pulled 5 questions, and within standard 6, I pulled 5 questions. And then here are the questions here. So the reason why I picked 5 for each is I feel like that is a good sample size to provide me good, accurate data as to whether or not my students have shown mastery for 5 and 6.
Great. Okay, so the first question in looking at an assessment is, am I going to get the data that I want out of this test? So what I want to do is ask you some questions to make sure both you and I, as the revisers of this test, are on the same page and we're happy with that answer. So EJ, why don't you tell me a little bit about where you are in your year of math? Where are you in your pacing guide so that I can understand how well this test matches up to where you are in your pacing guide and what came before and what will come after?
Okay. Let me actually refer you back to our folders that we're putting together as a Lyft community. And I will show you that within math, we also have power pacing documents provided. And in particular, I can actually open it up by grade level as well. So if I open up elementary, 5th grade, excuse me while I scroll down, you will see that I think that's 5th grade, 4th grade, Sorry if you guys got dizzy watching that. Let's go to January. And as you can see, here's January 1st. And then I'm looking here. So I believe, yeah, I'm right on track with what the CMS suggested pacing is. So,
Right.
um, in terms of your question, like where am I in the year? I'm on track with the CMS pacing, and I'm assessing MB.5 and MB.6.
Got it. And I see here that it's not the first time NBT 5 and 6 have been taught. They've been taught in units 1 and 2, which is great. So hopefully we'll see stronger mastery on this test. And I also see it's coming up in future units like unit 6, plus you're adding on some NBT. So there's still room to continue growing. Okay, so I see where you are.
Okay.
Great. So you've been able to articulate very, very clearly what you're testing, why you're testing, and that makes me feel really confident in the instruction you're going to be providing from students and the information you're going to be able to get and use from this test.
Excellent. So now that we've covered the first question, the second question is one that Sonia and I can't emphasize enough the importance of. Does this assessment align with the necessary power standards? So some of you may wonder what we mean by the power standards. So same thing, I'm going to take us back into the folders. We have put together power standards. And what I mean by power standards is we've taken the released EOGs, grades 3 through 5, and basically tallied how many questions per standard there were. So the states release the distribution by domain, but as you can see, as you continue to go right, and each column showcases what questions were assessed in the release EOG and what percent the power standards were. So we've done that for grades 3 through 5. So since we're looking at a 5th grade assessment, I will scroll down through grade 5. If you're a 6-8 teacher, the Math PLC facilitators also have put together a similar document where they have vetted the released EOGs and have identified the areas of focus. So now that I've pulled up our 5th grade power standards, let's look at base 10. And as you can see, the domain consists of 22 to 27%. So about a fifth of our test, or a fourth of our test, is going to be on this particular domain. But if I continue to go right, I can see that on the actual EOG, standard 5 had one here and one here. So a total of 2 questions, and then standard 6 had one there and one there. So each standard had 2 questions, which I then put to the side here. So within this domain, 17% of the standards were assessed were standards 5 and 6.
Wow, EJ, this is a really powerful document. So what I'm seeing from this is that in order for students to pass the 5th grade math EOG exam, they are going to be able to better pass that test if they get all the questions right in the NBT domain and the fractions domain, and that's why these domains are highlighted. Because if we can get students to solidly master this concept, they will have most of the test, 50 plus 25, they'll have 75% of the questions correct. So it would be good to put most of our energy into making sure students have 80% or higher mastery, consistently mastering on both number base 10 and fractions. What I'm noticing is that based on the pacing that you've chosen for 5th grade, that this test that you're giving is focused on a standard that only makes up 17% of what makes up this big chunk of numbers and operations base 10. So it's good for students to master and get 17% right. It's going to be even better for them to additionally master NBT 4 and 7. And so I want you to think about that, keep that in the back of your mind for the future teaching and assessment that comes up on standards 4 and 7, that your students need to do even better and additionally master these in order to get most of NBT correct.
Excellent.
Does that make sense to you?
It does. So what you're saying is because out of the power standards, 4 and 7 had the largest chunk, I should try to include that in my assessments if I can, if it's something that's already been covered, or maybe as part of a daily warm-up or a ticket out the door to really ensure that my students are showing mastery for that particular power standard.
Yeah, and when you and I sit down to look at the assessment where 4 and 7 are going to be, that future assessment, then we know that we need to make sure that we scaffold even better and that our tests and even before that, our CFUs and our exit tickets and things include scaffolding, and we can make sure students are getting 80% on those scaffolded pieces so that they can get high mastery on 4 and 7.
Excellent. So as a teacher, I really know, as a fifth grade teacher, looking at this last column, these are going to help me identify what standards were most assessed in the released EOG and help me really narrow my focus to make sure my students are showing mastery in that part, because that's going to help us move the bar.
Yes, I do want to caution you, though, to not only look at this last column. So, for example, when we look at the first domain, operations and algebraic thinking, if we go to this last column first, it looks like they are most important because 66% is higher than anything else we see here. But really what we need to pay attention to first is that on the released EOC or EOG, O&A only makes up 5 to 10%. Within that 5 to 10%, 66% are on OA1. So if you do end up teaching OA or you've already taught it and you want to assess it, you want to make sure the bulk of the questions are on OA1 as opposed to OA2 or OA3, which are less represented. But moving forward, there's only so much time between January and June. We want to focus all of our attention on making sure students are mastering 80% or higher consistently on these two domains way before we get to O&A.
Sounds great. Thank you for that clarification. That it was a huge takeaway for me is to make sure we are assessing the power standards.
The final thing I want to bring to your attention in a discussion of power standards is this is where it's important to be a math nut about your subject and to know how are all the different standards within this domain similar and different. So on the EOC, EOG, the questions are listed on the answer key as NBT, but it doesn't tell you whether it's NBT 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7. We've got to go in and actually look at what kinds of NBT questions they are because you know NBT 4 and 7 are about decimals and place value, whereas NBT 5 and 6 are about multiplication and division of multi-digit numbers. And those are two very different skills and concepts to teach students. So even though all of these questions on the released EOC are technically NBT, they are very different things that need to be taught. And so 5 and 6 is what your test is on. And when you and I looked back at our test, we realized that 5 and 6 are about one concept. 2 and 3 are related to 4 and 7. 2 and 3 scaffold up to 4 and 7. So that means on the test that you've given, you're right to only have NBT 5 and 6 represented.
Great.
You didn't need 2 and 3 to show you scaffolding or student misunderstanding because they don't lead to better mastery of 5 and 6. However, on your next test and in the future between January and June, you need to make sure that you are assessing 4 and 7 and that you're keeping your eye on 2 and 3 so that if there's any misunderstandings, you can catch it at that scaffolded, lower scaffolded level to make sure students are actually doing well on what makes up most of their NBT questions, which is 4 and 7.
Excellent. Makes perfect sense. Thank you for that insight. Okay. Finally, guys, our last question, and one that may seem obvious to you, but one that it's always good to check on, is do the questions on my assessment have the following: rigor, alignment to the standards, 4 answer choices, and correctly worded? Sonia, do you want to speak to that at all?
Sure. So your test we've already discussed.
I gotta go find it again.
Your test we've already discussed is in line with your pacing guide and is in alignment with the power standards, the way that we've defined power standards. Okay, you're going to get a lot of bang for your buck. Now, in order to make sure that you are ready to teach up to this test and have students master it, you're going to actually make sure that these finishing touches are on there on the test, and that those finishing touches are on the test so that you can take the test yourself and use it to inform your instruction. So one thing you're going to look for is, do these questions on my test match the language and what the students are going to see on the EOC EOG? Are the sentence lengths matching up? Do the key vocabulary and terms match up? Are their four answer choices the same way that they are on the EOC EOG? Are those answer choices similarly tricky? Do they have the same kind of tricks and close responses in the answers with just one decimal out of place or some place value piece off? So you just want to make sure that it mirrors. Excellent. Then what you're going to do is actually take the test so that you can annotate the test and pick out the vocabulary that you do need to make sure you teach and students master. So you can see what is tricky about the answer choices that you lead students to read through, to double check and to truly think. And as you annotate your test and take it, you're not only making sure that the correct answer choice is actually available on the test, but you're actually developing the stepwise processes for teaching the skills and the thinking that you want students to be able to demonstrate and apply for the test. If you take this test in your PLC, then all your members in the PLC will have different methods for solving the problems, and that will give you multiple methods of thinking to present to your students.
Great. And I really like the idea of cross-checking these questions with released EOGs. And just for your information, in the math folder that I've shared, you can click on the grades, and I've got the released EOGs in there as well as a reference for you. So Sonia and I both hope going over this presentation was beneficial. You will receive this via email, and it will also include next steps as to what we're going to be doing in January for our instructional leadership team meeting. Happy holidays!